Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm going to have a conversation with my good friend, Peter Scalzo. Been on a 19-year cancer journey and struggling a bit right now with his own just medical conditions. Things have been difficult for the last few weeks. And I think it's going to tie into our topic, so I'll probably share a little bit of that story or the current story of himself, because our topic today is the journey to peace is a pathway of descent. And you've been on a form of descent for a little while here in your health journey. It's just been hard. You want to just add some thoughts to get us kicked off?
Yeah, I think that in the past few weeks, actually the past year, I have not felt well, and my kidney function numbers are really going the wrong way sort of quickly. And I've had a number of tests to see if I have a recurrence going on. I currently have a blood clot and some nerve pain, which really hurts. But just general feeling of tiredness, fatigue, that sort of thing. So I was down at the hospital today. I go again tomorrow morning and get some more answers. But I can sort of tell when things are struggling, so I can feel that.
Yeah, and the reason why I think we're talking about this is that we're going to tie it in with a recovery concept and kind of just pull a lot of pieces together here. And you were even sharing just some of your thoughts related to, Christ's journey here on earth and the disciples along the way. And you were sharing with me earlier, you were pictures of those closing days for the disciples as came to Christ's death was a journey of descent for every single one of them. And just thinking a lot, one of the things that we were kind of walking along, we had talked about, moving out of denial a bit in your life. And then we moved forward. And today we kind of wanted to just think about, what does it mean to turn your will over to the care and control of God? Because that's part of the journey of peace, is this when you get to, in recovery, I think is step 3, is that we make a decision to turn our lives and wills over to the care of God and to his care and control. And what does that look like? And that's the reason why, it's a bit of a journey of descent, because as you're going into hardship, it's this release of control and these types of things. And as you do release control, there's peace in that. So that's kind of the ideas that are behind it. But we want to talk specifics or examples and just connect those dots a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, and I'm watching a series about Jesus and his followers, which is really well done, and they're just releasing some more episodes now. But one thing I noticed, they do a good job capturing the humanity and sort of what's going on. And one of the things that I notice is that Jesus is on a journey of descent to the cross, and his disciples are not expecting that, even though they've heard him say that, the Son of Man must be delivered up to the chief priests and scribes, and he's going to die, all that. They listened, but they didn't understand. And I think that the first thing I know about a journey of descent is it's something that I don't want to do. Like, my cancer journey has been a journey that I don't want to do. I did not choose it. So the first question for me is, how do I respond to a situation I know I'm not in control of, and yet I hold fast to my faith in Jesus Christ, and I believe strongly that he's in charge, and yet, the situations in my life are just basically spinning out of control and seem to be going downward, not upward.
And what do you feel inside in this moment?
Yeah, I think there's definitely working through worry and fear is part of it, but also some sadness. I think there's grieving involved in some of this because, for instance, I'll use my marriage that ended as an example. That marriage ended and it did not come back together, and so there's grieving over the split of the family. Is there life afterwards? Of course. Can God restore and do a work? Yes. But nevertheless, there is grief. And I think it's one of the things I think about is that I am not in control, that God's ways are different many times than my ways. And it's a mystery to me. And I know we've talked about that before on other podcasts. So it's, can I accept something that I'm not pleased with, in my journey in faith.
And this is a control question too. And
Yeah.
so we talk about control a lot in recovery. And I think when you let go of control, there's also that could feel like anxiousness, or it can feel like, hey, I don't actually have to strive any longer. And that's the peace side of this. But you have to release control to something or someone who literally has the power, or who's trustworthy enough to release that too. And so it's not just letting go and just, there's a concept there, let go, let God. But I think sometimes that gets used pretty flippantly. It's like what's the country song? It's like, Jesus, take the wheel, and there's, just, you let go of the wheel of the car and hope the car doesn't crash, I guess, is kind of a thought process.
Yeah.
And I think there is a level of meant to be, is like, hey,
Yeah.
letting God steer your life and the control. And I was thinking about organizationally here, what that looks like here as a leader of an organization. And we just did our largest fundraising event, you and I, last week, and it was good. And we had a good time, and we had a lot of support there. And we've been just barely bouncing along, just financially here. And there's a lot of anxiety if I have to strive to control, if I as a leader have to strive to control, the funds, where they're going to come from. If it doesn't work out, I can get wrapped up and spend a lot of time in anxiousness and worry. And I think the difference, the tension is it's trusting God with the future of the mission and what he wants to do here, and taking and putting the next step in front of your one foot in front of the other.
Right.
So we just did a fundraising event. We did call all of our contacts and invite them, and we put a lot of time and effort into doing that. But I don't have to worry about the outcome, or I don't have to, I can't control the outcome even.
Right.
And it's releasing that part of the control,
Yeah.
but it's not releasing responsibility from taking and putting one foot in front of the other. And so you just came this morning from another doctor appointment.
Yeah.
And you don't, releasing control isn't giving up on your medical journey.
Right.
You still keep putting one foot in front of the other, but you don't have to worry, I guess. And I'll let you put your own thoughts about how does this fit into the medical and the cancer journey?
Well, I'll just talk about the 12 disciples right now, because that's something that I would like to talk about right now.
Oh, you're just changing
what am I again? Am I the host, or what am I, the host, right?
You're the guy with the 19-year cancer journey. Yeah, you're the guy with all the experience here.
I was thinking, though, just about these men who had left their homes following this prophet, this rabbi, Jesus, and watching him perform these miracles and thinking, oh, okay, well, he's going to come out. He's going to come out of the closet as the Messiah. He's going to overthrow Rome. We're going to finally have a nation state, Israel. The Jews are going to have a nation state. And so as the situation was completely different than what they thought it was, and they weren't understanding, I think I can relate to that in the cancer journey. There's been several points on the timeline where I was like, hold on, this is not supposed to happen this way, and I don't understand. The 14th surgery, where everything was so terrible, thinking I was going to do an end-of-life process. 2017, being, told sent home on disability to contact hospice and do an end-of-life journey. These are points in the timeline, recurrences, where I sort of scratch my head and say, well, Lord, I don't understand. And I think that's where my journey with Jesus comes in. And it's like to accept. I mean, we talk about acceptance all the time, but that I am not in control. And I think it's, can I trust Jesus in this? Can I? Can I put my soul, my spirit, my mind, my body, everything in his hands? If this body dies, that's in Jesus' hands. So it's, and we're all going to pass, and it's the pain and suffering piece. and all that. Would I choose a different path? Yes, but can I trust that Jesus has a greater purpose in this? And I believe yes. And so I also believe that will it disappoint some people? Yes. But it's about really Jesus's higher purpose going on through what happens to me. I mean, I've given this whole journey to him, and I know that I'm not in charge of it.
For you, the descent part then
Yeah.
is what? I mean, just a touch more like
Yeah.
when we say it's a pathway, it's a journey of descent.
Yeah. It's a journey to really, I'll just use the phrase poverty of spirit, taking up my cross, denying myself. It's really like, Peter, your interests are X, but those interests are being set aside. And what's happening is that Jesus is asking you to go on a different path. And am I willing to do that? Yeah, and it's a path that looks like a descent. Is that what?
Yeah, no. Can I just rephrase it? And what I think I hear you're saying too is an acceptance of suffering, but for the purposes of whatever God wants to do with that suffering, because you've been suffering, but you're accepting that there's suffering because you think there's a greater purpose in the suffering. Is what I think I hear you in the theme of what you just shared a little bit. It's like, I recognize I wouldn't choose this, but I've chosen Christ and whatever his will is. And this suffering has a purpose. It has a meaning. I'm going to accept that. It's a descent to accept suffering as a way of life, as something that you have to go through for your greater purpose that you have in life. But if you were given no suffering choice and a suffering choice, both of us are going to choose the no suffering choice. And so it's as if it had to be chosen for us. And then we go, okay, but I'm going to lean into that because I know there's something real and meaningful, and there's peace in that. Because in the serenity prayer, we talked about the serenity prayer, and at the end, there's this line. It's like accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. And that's why whoever wrote that prayer was very deep. And it's part of why we would say, that the journey to peace is a pathway of descent. And one of the authors I really liked that he wrote, from brokenness to community, but he also wrote, he also had discussions about, what community looked like, but he started an organization called The Arch, and Jean Benet, and he wrote this thing. It was like, hey, the Christian journey is a pathway of descent, and you climb down this ladder, and as you climb down this ladder and you get to the deepest room, you'll find that Jesus is waiting at the very last seat of the table. And you start looking at Jesus talking while he's here, as you were talking about the disciples, you see him saying, take the last seat at the table. You see over and over where he asks people to take the road of poverty or descent, or let the first be last and the last be first. He has an upside down kingdom. And so the Christianity journey is all about an upside down kingdom, and it is upside down in a pathway of descent. And then there's, I think you and I would say that in great theological discussion, you're going to find that there's something profound, and that there's, in that same great truth, in the descent, there's also an ascent, and they're happening at the exact same time. And these are, you see that in a lot of great theological concepts. And so we're not saying that you're not ascending and getting closer to God in that sense. And that's where the peace comes in. It's like they're happening at the exact same time. Descent brings peace, but what does descent look like? And that's why I thought just hearing your story a little bit would help a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that's really good, Sean. I think when Scalzo says to enlarge your soul through grief and loss, I think a lot of this descent has losses in it. And so grieving is involved. And I think there's something about grieving and giving up control and filling yourself with Christ. That is a beautiful aspect to it. to dealing with loss. It's a abandonment of self. I can't do this. I have no power in this. Like we did powerlessness last time we did a podcast, and so Jesus, I need you, and I give my life to you. And in that process of turning over there's a tremendous amount of peace in that. Because it's not up to me. It's up to him. My life is in his hands.
And that's what we would call a paradox.
Yep.
And so it has these two truths that appear to be opposite of each other that are happening at the exact same time. And that's what I think you're describing. I think it's really helpful to know that there's something deeply true inside of this. And then you're comparing these stories in the Bible and then to your own life. And you're also, why you're here, why you're doing this podcast is because you want to share the great hope and peace that has been bubbling up inside of you.
Right.
And yet the very start of this, we said, hey, you're going through a period of descent. Your health has really been painful. It's been, for the last few weeks, and I've been around you enough to know that you're suffering, and you're even trying to you're not trying to, you're not whining about it, for lack of a better terms. If you know what I'm saying, I don't ever hear you whining about it, but I can tell that you're suffering.
Yeah.
And that's you're wrestling with both pieces at the exact same time.
Right.
And I think that's what we're talking about here, is recognizing that, but you're powerless over that suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's sometimes a bit hard to accept, is the powerlessness, which we talked about last time.
It is. I mean, the reality of my life is that 1/3 of my life has been spent in the cancer space.
It's been crazy when you think about it. Yes,
it's been 19, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So, sometimes I am honest with Jesus and say, that's too long. Either take me or heal me completely so I can get out of the space. But that's where I have to say, Lord, it's not about my will. I love when Jesus said, take this cup of suffering away from me, but it's not my will, but your will to be done. And I think it would only be human to say, I can't do this and I don't want to do it. But I think the other choice is, but Lord, I trust you. So if it's your will that I go through this, then so be it. And I think joy is an underlying bedrock that says, it's not about parties and, your baseball team winning or whatever. It's
happiness.
It's not about that. It's about this deep confidence that Jesus has a purpose and a plan in this. And I'm not talking about the Holocaust, natural disasters and all that, because I struggle with those things too. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about my own cancer journey for my life. Because it's a long time to be in a cancer journey, 1/3 of my life. I had to leave my practice of law, my marriage ended, and I do medical stuff all the time. And so my life is not about chasing from a party to a party or this or that. It's really about submitting and surrendering what I want to what God's doing.
So this is where I'm going to complain a little bit if I can.
Yeah.
Because I had this great title for this podcast, and Jack just destroyed it. And because I said the journey to peace was a pathway of descent, and he took all that out of there. But what you just described was a journey. So Jack, I'm sure, is scowling at my ear right now because my
he's about to push the button.
Threatening to push the mute.
There's some kind of a button over there that he's going to push.
So all kidding aside, but you just described a journey. I think that's the one thing I'd like to highlight a touch more on.
Yeah.
And I'm going to even go back because that I've been really loving this Old Testament area with Elisha, and I want to just highlight that too, because it's a journey, and what that means is that there's time involved. Because to do a journey, we have to be time travelers on a journey, and that is in an earthly physical sense. The clock moves at the same speed, and what I like about this is you referenced kind of Jesus with the disciples and watching their pathway of descent, and that was part of their journey. And you can kind of measure that, and I see the same pattern in the Old Testament with Elisha's story, is that the journey to peace was a pathway of descent. And he starts out in his prophetic part of his journey when he was commissioned in a sense, or when he was given a double portion of Elijah's spirit, he's given power. And so I look at the book of Second Kings there and his journey there as a picture of a great prophet maturing. And a lot of us don't think about prophets maturing like this, what they were mature. That's why they were great prophets. No, but this is the story of the maturing of a great prophet. And so you see him with inappropriate power, and he strives. He uses the power to do things, whether it be transactional relationships or partying the water or cursing kids. He's using his power inappropriately, but you see through time that God matures him in such a way that he surrenders to what God has for him, and he's no longer striving with his power. He's literally looking at the power that he's been given, the position he's been given, and he's listening to God as to what God's calling is, what his purposes are, and he's surrendered. You see, and so it's like he surrendered his life and his will, because up until he gets to that maturity part, he's working off of his will and for his own care and control so much of the time. And I say that, it's like, why did he curse the kids? Well, because they were making fun of him because he was bald. And so he was so immature, he couldn't handle somebody making fun of him. And at the end of life, he's so uncaring about what people think of him. I love this story. Like this really rich guy shows with from another country who has bags of silver and gold, and he asks to be healed, and he doesn't even come out to meet him. Yeah, he's a general, he's a high position, and the guy was so mad that he didn't come out. He didn't care. He didn't care what he thought of him. Now, in his early stages, he cared what some little kids thought about him.
Wow,
and late in
great,
years,
Sean.
He didn't care a flip about what this guy thought about him.
Yeah.
And he still offered to heal him. It wasn't that he ignored him in the sense of he met his need, but he never went out and met him. He didn't take his gold and silver. He was in a position where he was focused on what God was doing so completely. And he didn't even need to worry about, you see lots of pictures where the prophets were struggling for funds.
Yeah. Yes.
He didn't think about the funds.
Right.
He wasn't thinking about, hey, I need to get the funds because it'll help the rest of the Prophets Guild and they can pay off any debts they may have. He was just like, no, I know exactly where all my provision comes from. I know where all the care comes from.
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Yeah.
God's going to meet my need every step, one day at a time.
Yeah.
And so if he was still working from a place of, I need to work on my care and control, then he would have gone out and grabbed the gold and silver and, hey, I'll heal you at the same time. Thanks. Great transaction. See you later. That's not what he did.
Right.
And so I say it's a journey though, because you see that he starts out way early and he has to learn all those along the way. And I think it's a long-winded way of kind of thinking about, but if you think about your own cancer journey, if I think about my journey here in ministry and the things I've gone through, I've recognized that God's been slowly maturing where I can release my own need to control. And there's great peace now in not having to worry about if we're here tomorrow, it's because of his grace. As long as we're still putting one foot in front of the other, seeking his will, then whatever the results are, whatever the outcome is up to him. And I don't have to strive and feel anxious. It's great peace in that. And I think you have described things in your own cancer journey, which is very similar.
Yeah. Serenity prayer is right in line with that. And we've done podcasts on that serenity prayer, but it's so meaningful about this
Such
stuff.
a
But
deep prayer,
I can definitely, I think that the early part of my cancer journey for about 10 years was surgery, removal of cancer, surgery, removal of cancer, surgery for whatever, rerouting, all these things. And then in 2015, when it was metastatic cancer, that was a different story, but it was another point in the timeline, a very significant one, because that point in the timeline screamed out at me, Peter, you're not in charge. You're not in control. This is not going to go the way that you thought it would. Mm-hmm. I'm in charge. I'm in control. And I'm going to add this. I have a loving purpose in store for you. whatever that may be, right? I mean, I think that that's a scriptural truth and a spiritual truth for me, is that God has a good plan for my life. And if, let's say tonight the blood clot travels up and does something to me and I pass. Okay, God's in charge, and that's His plan for me, and He's going to do something with that passing. And one thing is, and we've talked about this, but I feel very good about that. I've tried to be very purposeful in this cancer journey, and that has actually, I felt God called me to do speaking, a book, and now this podcast, and so I'm leaving trail markers along the way. I listened to our first one the other day, the launch, and you did a great job. You said, we hope to leave trail markers. So these are things that God taught me, and I feel great about the fact that we've left trail markers. So when I'm gone, these trail markers will be there, and I'm pleased with that. And, one of the things is that after the cross, there was a resurrection.
Yeah.
And then there was a Pentecost, and the church started, right? And so they were imbued with power from the Holy Spirit and started the church. It still doesn't mean they still had to walk a pathway of suffering. I mean, they all passed from being martyred, except for John. He was exiled to the Isle of Patmos, but it still wasn't easy.
Yeah. There's two things I wanted to highlight off it. And it's this concept of suffering. And I was listening to Francis Chan, a while back, and he described one of the Chinese churches he had visited, who there was a period of time where the church had been a little bit freed up in China to be a little bit more overt. And the Chinese church then started doing church kind of like we do here in the Western world. And then the government came and just collapsed all that and just crushed them. And he had visited the leader afterwards. He's like, "Hey, how did you guys handle that?" And he was just like, what was the best thing that ever happened to us, to be crushed like that? And he was like, "What are you talking about?" I was, "Well, because we became weak and ineffective." And he was telling about the 5 characteristics of the Chinese church. There was 5 principles they believed in. And I won't be able to recite them all off the top of my head, but the one I will be able to remember clearly was like, embrace suffering for the purpose of the kingdom.
Amen. Yeah.
That's not one of them. If you were to talk to us in the Western world, we don't have that in our tenets.
Yeah.
It's just not something and it's not that everybody would argue with you about it, but if you were to say, "Hey, what's your 5 tenets?" Suffering wouldn't come up as one of the 5 keys, but it was for the Chinese church. Now, I think I've heard that the Chinese church is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing church in the world. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to document and know because a lot of it's underground. And so I don't want to overplay this, but there's something to be said about, hey, to see the growth of the kingdom of God, something that's real and true, you have to embrace suffering. And the second thing I wanted to highlight was the other quote that Vignette had that I really liked, and it stuck with me about here. And he was like, "People come to l'Arche to serve the poor, and they only stay if they become the poor." And I would say all the time, well, that's exactly what CBF looked like too. People come to CBF to serve the poor, but they only stay if they become the poor. And I think there's some parallel to that to the cancer journey. And that is, you become a patient, but you only find peace if you let go of control and surrender and become broken. And it's okay. It's like surrendering to that brokenness. It's a form of poverty. It's a form of descent.
Yeah, so I've been over to Israel several times, 7 actually. But the Garden of Gethsemane, that word Gethsemane means olive press. And so we also watched how they made olive oil back then. And they grind it up on this wheel first, and then they press it. But the more pressure they put on it, the more pure the olive oil is. And I don't think it's any mistake that's what happened to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. But, the scripture says in Hebrew, it's really interesting. He learned obedience from what he suffered.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And so suffering, although unbelievably painful, can produce a beautiful thing, beautiful result.
There's no doubt that I embrace this idea that it's a pathway to peace, the way the Serenity Prayer puts it out there. So I hope our listeners just got a taste of that from today's podcast, and just thinking about your life. I think about my own, and the greatest learnings in my life did not come from moments of happiness, riding a roller coaster or whatever else, winning a game at something. Almost all of the great learnings, the great understandings in life have come through journeys of suffering. And I know that applies to you also. And I'm going to bet that resonates with those who are watching or listening to this podcast and connects in a big way. And so if you want to experience peace, embrace that road of descent, that journey of descent in your own life. Any final thoughts from you today?
No, I think that's great, Sean. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. If you want to hear more, check out cancerandpeace.com, and you'll see Peter's book and a lot of other resources that we've referenced through time here on this podcast. Thanks a bunch for listening.
Thank you.